Welcome sports fans to GenX Classic Sports, where we bring the nostalgia of our sports-filled youth into the present day. Do you remember when football players wore stickum? Do you remember when the NBA played defense? Do you remember when Wrigley Field turned on the lights? If so, then this podcast is for you. Grab your favorite retro jersey, crack open a cold one, and let's stroll down memory lane together. We're here to discuss iconic sports moments, teams, and athletes from our generation. This is GenX Classic Sports, sports talk for Gen Xers by Gen Xers.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our Greatest Athletes series. This one is about the one and only Bo Jackson. Joining me are Mark and Casey, two of the founding fathers of the GenX Classic Sports podcast. So let's rejoin the discussion about the great, the one, the only, the rare unicorn himself, Mr. Bo Jackson. So then he gets drafted in the 4th round by Kansas City Royals in the baseball draft. Now remember, he got drafted in the 2nd round out of high school. He's fallen 2 rounds. Okay. So he's given up money is what I'm getting at. There's a big difference in bonus and so forth. So because of the Tampa Bay thing, he doesn't want to honor the Tampa Bay contract, and he does sign with the Royals, and he is assigned to Double-A Memphis immediately. Now, I don't know where I saw it, and I didn't write it down, but somewhere I read he still had a pretty good signing bonus. I just don't remember the number, but it wasn't. I don't even know if it was $1 million, but it was something decent. But still, he gave up money. But he goes to Double-A Memphis. Okay, so that's his rookie year, more or less. He goes to Double-A Memphis. So that's 86. All right. In 87, and he got called up in 86, but in 87, he played his first full major league season. So he's a year removed from college football. So in 1987, his first year with the Royals, he gets Rookie of the Year. So he's okay at baseball, right? He's pretty good at it. Did y'all see the stat line I put on there? How many home runs he hit as a rookie? By the way, you got to put this in 1987 or 86 and 7 numbers when 30 home runs was a lot. For a seasoned veteran, 30 was a lot. And he hit how many his rookie year? I think he hit 22 or 3 in 116 games or something. Now, I noticed that his average dipped in the pros from college. He batted 235. But, you know, that's a natural assumption, isn't it, to make that he's seeing better pitching, and he wasn't a full-time baseball player anyway. He's kind of playing when he could in college. So it doesn't surprise me that his numbers on average dropped, but that doesn't mean his power did, you know. So 22 home runs at that level is pretty good, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to know what his slugging percentage was.
Yeah, and of course I didn't look that up, but the next little oddity on there about his rookie year was that he hit 4 home runs in consecutive at bats.
Yeah,
and that's a major league tied a major league record. Casey, do you remember his early years in baseball with the Kansas City Royals at all? Do you remember anything about that?
I remember the highlights. I remember the All-Star game. Didn't he lead off?
The 19.
Yeah.
Yep.
Lead off with a home run.
I think that's where most of the country finally realized, oh, this isn't a hobby for him. This guy knows what he's doing. That 89 All-Star game was huge. I mean, I remember watching that, you know, like it was yesterday. That was my senior year of high school. And here he was starting at center field and leadoff and for the American League. And in the bottom of the 1st, he leads off his part of the inning with a home run. So dude's got a flair for the dramatic for sure, right?
I remember him breaking bats like toothpicks, just snapping bats over his thighs.
Yeah, that's what I remember. Casey is.
He also snapped them over his head.
Yeah, that's how strong he was.
Yeah.
Wooden bats.
Yeah, that was impressive.
He would snap them. he'd snap them on his thigh and on his helmet.
Yeah.
I think we all remember
Yeah.
the catch on the wall, running up the wall and making the catch.
Yeah, for sure. That made ESPN highlights when he left cleat marks, 90% up that wall when he ran that horseshoe shape up the wall and turned and came back down it and hopped off of it like it was nothing. That's still one of the craziest things I've ever seen on a ball field. And we lost Casey again, but we're going to keep going. Mark in '89 when he was actually when he led off the All-Star game, bottom of the first with that home run, he was the MVP. He was named the MVP of that game. So I'm going to bring this up later. So Casey, he was MVP of the '89 All-Star game when he hit the home run and played center field. I bring that up because I'm going to do some statistical stuff later that I looked up about the odds of high school players making it to the pros and so forth, and you'll find out how much of a unicorn he is and how big of a crime it was for dude to be 72nd on that list. All right, so '89 was probably his best season. He hit 256 with 32 home runs and 105 RBIs. Back then, if anybody young is ever going to hear this, they're going to say that's pretty terrible numbers. No, it's not. Not for 1989. It's not. You're still you haven't had. I mean, guys just didn't even hit 40 home runs then, really. So 32 is obviously a lot, and 100 RBIs is a lot. He was a career 250 batter, which isn't bad for a power hitter. He hit 141 home runs, had 415 RBIs. In 1990, I think was his best batting average. The following year, he had batted 272 with 28 home runs. That's a man for 1990. That's a heck of a year.
And his slugging percentage was .523. I'm looking at stats now for that year.
Okay.
On base percentage was .346.
Well, according to Moneyball, that's all that matters, right?
Right.
He gets on
So
base.
he hit a lot of home runs, had a decent batting average. On base percentage was up there. Slugging percentage was out of the world.
I'd say he had a really good batting average for a quote power hitter.
Yeah, I mean 272.
Yeah, and I remember people like Jack Clark hitting 210 and hitting 30 home runs, and everybody loved it. The note on that part that was most interesting to me was that he only averaged 88 baseball games a year. Of course, we kind of understand that once you talk about his NFL stuff, but I don't know, big muscle guy like that. Maybe he was hurt a lot too. Maybe he pulled a lot of hammies, and I don't know. But 88
what kind
games.
of steals did he have in the majors?
I really didn't look that up. It didn't jump out at me if I did. I don't know. I mean, Mark or somebody can maybe look it up in a minute if they got a computer in front of them. I don't know. I don't remember that being, since he was a power hitter, I'm going to guess that they didn't steal him a lot because they didn't want him breaking a wrist, sliding into second or something would be my guess. I mean, could he have been a hell of a base stealer? Obviously, because I don't know how anybody in Major League Baseball would be faster.
He had 82 in his career.
Yeah, so no, I mean he didn't. Yeah, they did. I'm sure that's what it was. They didn't run him because they didn't want him to get hurt. Okay, so and to wrap up his baseball, I will say that after the hip injury that he's famous for, he got the 1993 Comeback Player of the Year in Major League Baseball because he came back and played well enough with a artificial hip that he made Comeback Player of the Year. I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I don't really remember that. I don't remember him coming back after that injury. I didn't know he played baseball, to be honest.
Yeah.
After that.
I did because he had a noticeable limp. I mean, they used to joke about how limping he was still the fastest guy in Major League Baseball pretty much because even with that pronounced and noticeable limp, he could still fly down the first baseline. And now I don't know how much it slowed him down, but you could see that he was limping. Okay, so
Right.
let's jump to the NFL because that's what a lot of people are going to know about Bo Jackson. So Bo Jackson told the Bucks, "Don't draft me" in 1986. They did it anyway, so he just didn't play for them. And when that happened, and by the way, that was the number one pick in the draft, fresh off of a Heisman Trophy. And when that happens and they don't play for you for a year, you lose their rights. So by sitting
Right.
in or sitting out, the Bucks had no claim over him, so he went back into the draft pool. Now, even though he did that, nobody would touch him because he was playing Major League Baseball. Here it is. I found the number. When he got drafted by the Royals in the fourth, he signed for 3 years and $1 million for 3 years. So he had a $300,000 and some change contract for signing in the fourth round. That was just his first contract. Now, when the Bucks drafted him and he turned them down, that would have been that was more or less slotted the year before and the year after for a $7.6 million contract for 5 years. So he turned down 7.6 million to earn 1 million. That's how bad they made him mad.
Seems to be a trait with him. Is, you kind of make him mad, he makes you pay for it. But
Yep. So since they lost their rights to him after the draft, and he's playing baseball, I think the NFL mostly forgot about the guy. But in the 7th round in 1987, the Raiders picked him up. And by the way, if you're going to pick a team that would do something like this, you'd probably pick the Raiders, wouldn't you?
right, that's right. That's what I thought about.
Now, the thing about the Raiders, and regardless of what you think about whether it worked or not, one of Al Davis's absolute beliefs was that you needed to be fast. That was something that he brought in with his philosophy from coaching. He believed in speed. So, I mean, that had to appeal to him at least. So they drafted him in the 7th round, the Raiders. He set out a year of football. They pick him up in the 7th round, and the reason that he agreed to go to them is what? And I don't know how much money they paid him in the 7th round. It probably was a minimum contract, but so why did he sign with the Raiders?
Oh, because
I don't know.
Because they told him he could play baseball.
Absolutely. Al Davis told him, Mark, that he
Okay.
could play baseball. They would
Okay.
figure. Yeah, Al Davis said, "We'll figure out how to make it work. If you have to miss work for us, we'll work with you on it." So now he's got his chance. So think about this. When this is happening, Deion Sanders is still in college.
Right.
So if you're our age, 1987 comes around and you realize that a dude is about to play Major League Baseball and in the NFL, and who had ever seen that?
Right.
I mean, yeah, maybe in the 20s and 30s or whatever, but in the 80s and 70s and so forth, I mean, mind blown. This was not normal whatsoever. So Al Davis drafts him. And the next note under that is what I found the most interesting out of all of that was that his position they listed him at as a Raider initially was what?
Fullback.
And,
Fullback. Yeah.
yeah, and why was that?
Marcus Allen.
We all know how these ball players get possessive about their place on the organizational history. So here's Marcus Allen, best running back they've probably ever had, and now they draft the young kid, and so to smooth things over with old Marcus, they list Bo as a fullback.
So was he winding down his career at that point? Kind of.
Yeah, more or less, because he ended up with the Chiefs in the early '90s, whenever that was, and so I wouldn't say he was in his prime for sure. Because an NFL running back career is about 4 years anyway, so he was definitely had reached the peak and was probably on his way down. But he was still a quality running back, I'd say. But all right, so this is where business picks up in the sports world because now people are really noticing that Bo Jackson's doing some special stuff because in 1987 he joined the Raiders in Week 8, and back then I think it was still a 16-week schedule, wasn't it, Mark? Already a 16-week season, probably. Seems like Staubach played like a 12 or 14, and then they bumped it up to 16.
They did the 14, 16. But I'm thinking
Yeah.
16. Yeah.
So now, this is something y'all both know, and it's in the notes, but this is one of the most famous incidents, if not the most famous thing that Bo Jackson ever did. In Week 12, as a rookie, Monday Night Football, what did Bo Jackson do that's probably on YouTube 8 million times? By the way, it involves another Gen X guy that we'll talk about eventually, I promise.
Oh, I got you.
What did he do
Yeah,
on
I know
Monday
who you're
Night
talking about
Football
now.
that year?
He trucked Boz,
Another Gen
ran over
X.
him.
Yeah, Casey, I don't know if you remember that, but that's the year that the Boz was in year 1 or 2. I don't know, for the Seahawks. I can't remember exactly when he got drafted, but they were both about the same age. And on Monday Night Football, Bo ran him over on the Mark, 1 or 2 yard line, and yeah, you've
Yeah,
seen it,
I
Casey.
remember
Yeah.
that.
So I was watching when that happened. I love making it sound like it was some miraculous thing, but yeah, I was watching when that happened. But yeah, I was. He ran Bosworth completely over,
Yeah,
and
I mean it was wonderful.
there was no social media. Well, yeah, and that's what I was going to say. There was no social media at the time, but just going to school and talking to people, what was the sentiment around the nation, you think, on how many people were happy with that happening? You
Pretty
just
high.
Yeah, people hated the
Yeah.
boss, didn't they? Didn't they, Mark?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he was in today's world. He wouldn't be that bad. He wouldn't be as
No, not at
intolerable.
all. Yeah.
But back then he was, he was a showboat. He was a blowhard. He was a trash talker, and
Yeah, and
you know,
we'll do an episode on him for sure because I mean
yeah,
he was to
he was an
me.
interesting
Here's who
character.
I
Yeah,
compare him to. He was, and I read his life story, and it's pretty interesting. And obviously, he's kind of made amends as a grown man since then because he knows sort of he crossed some lines. But um, I would say that Boz was similar to Madonna in this way. Madonna
sure.
was so scandalous in 1985, and she wouldn't even. I mean, it wouldn't make a mark anywhere now. The stuff that she did back then, it'd be nothing now. And
Hmm.
Boz was the same way. The way most NFL and college players act now goes right back. The anything they do that's sort of flamboyant or whatever to draw attention to themselves. He's one of the guys that pioneered that, and it was so scandalous when he did it. He was outside of the traditional norm.
Yeah.
So most people hated him. That's the point. And Bo trucked him, and people loved it. I mean, if there had been social media, that would have been on Twitter 40 million times by the next morning, and people would have been loving it. So that was Bo's coming out party in the NFL. He had 221 yards rushing, sharing a backfield with Marcus Allen that night, 2 TDs, and for good measure, he threw in another touchdown receiving. At the time, that was a Monday Night Football record. I don't know if it still is, but 221 yards rushing. And in 8 games that season, he averaged 6.8 yards a carry. So isn't that kind of what Derrick Henry's doing right now? Isn't he averaging 6.5 or something right now in the NFL? I mean, I haven't looked lately, but I thought I heard somebody say that on the radio.
I think you're right.
And either way, that's a
Pretty
phenomenal number.
impressive.
Six and
Yeah.
a half. I mean, as Cowboys fans, we know that if the opponent averages 6.5 yards a carry against you, you're not going to win ever. So,
Go.
um, so it's impressive for dude to be a rookie and run 6.8 yards a carry. So, of course, it was probably an advantage for 8. He didn't go to training camp, and he had 8 weeks 8 weeks of baseball thrown in there, and then he just shows up more fresh and injury free than probably anybody on the team. So it kind of makes sense.
I watched a clip today, thinking of just to kind of. I mean, I don't know. unless you're watching a documentary or something, you don't see that kind of stuff much today. And so there was some old film on Twitter or something for about a 2 minute clip, and it was a game. The Raiders were playing Denver, and he was just running over guys. I mean, just it was incredible. It's like a big kid on a pee wee team.
He's must see TV back then. I mean, you couldn't take your eyes off of him because when people say this, it kind of makes me mad because it's overused. But he could score anytime he touched the ball. You don't say that about a ton of guys.
Right.
I mean, it didn't matter where he got the ball.
The thing that made him so good was, I mean, you saw uh, guys run over guys back then.
Right.
But his combination of speed, he could run over you, he could run through you, or he just run by you.
Or juke somebody and go around them and go. Yeah.
Right. What I was trying to think about was like Earl Campbell.
Yeah.
I mean, he ran over people, but he wasn't going to outrun anybody.
He wasn't going to outrun anybody, but right. And Herschel Walker was going to outrun everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was going to truck some people, but Bo was like Herschel Walker with two more notches, exactly. two more notches of speed and power. It's incredible. Must see TV, man, when he played. So, yeah, Casey, his highlights are luckily on YouTube, and I can watch his baseball, even his defensive highlights in baseball. I can watch them all day, and just, man, when he trucked people in football, it was hilarious. So, all of that being said, is basically a part-time NFLer. He made the Pro Bowl in 1990. He played Major League Baseball every season that he played in the NFL. For a career, he had 5.4 yards a carry, and he averaged 9 yards a reception, which is a lot for a running back.
Yeah, especially back then.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I guess I should historically say for everybody, but since we and our audience are old, it goes without saying that he played in the era of a fullback and two tight ends a ton of times on a ton of plays on the field. So
right.
It's not like these high school offenses where they have 5 receivers on the field and everybody runs a go route and then the running back runs a wheel and everybody's got their back turned and he catches it for 20 yards. No, it wasn't that kind of deal at all.
He'd be a good fantasy football league player right now for you.
Oh my God, yeah, he'd be a keeper for sure. So now we come to the hip injury. So I was watching when this happened, and I remember being just like, that didn't look too bad. Surely he'll be all right. I mean, it's not a big deal. He'll come back. And by the way, for just a kid that loves the Cowboys to be watching the Raiders game and thinking, oh no, Bo got hurt. I mean, that tells you how good he was right there. Cause
right.
I was all in on Bo, man. I just love watching him. So he's played in the playoffs against the Bengals in 91 and they tackled him and there's footage of it out there and it dislocated his hip. Just an absolute freakish. I don't even think I've ever heard of that happening otherwise in the NFL. I'm sure it has, but I don't remember it. And so as soon as he dislocates that hip, apparently what happened was he set it back in place or something himself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what the doctors later thought happened was when he crammed his own ball back into the socket, there was veins and things in the way that in surgery, they would have moved them out of the way. There were muscle and veins and nerves in the way. And he forced it back in there because he's strong enough to splinter a bat with his bare hands. He forced it back in there. Well, what that did was put pressure on those vessels and muscles and nerves, and for whatever reason they didn't go in surgically, know that was going on and fix it, and that actually caused all that tissue to die in that socket.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that was part of the reason it didn't recover like it should have.
Right. I think it actually it cut off the blood supply to the ball in his hip. That's what I remember.
Yeah.
Reading about. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was I read it was because they forced it back in there without doing it surgically. I don't know if that's true, but that's just something, you know, sounds
That's what I
sounds
remember reading.
believable to me.
Another interesting fact about this, and this is from an interview from him. He says, and a doctor backed it up. The fact that he was so strong, that's the only reason he dislocated his hip, because
Oh,
another guy being tackled in the way he was tackled, he would have just went down. But because his legs were so strong, it basically his leg pulled his hip out of socket while he was still trying
I
to run.
got you. I
In a
got. He
way,
had so
he
much
was
forward momentum
right,
and power that they pulled him this way. He was going that way, and something had to
right,
give, and it ended up being the hip.
right.
Oh my
Yep.
God! When you say it like that, that actually sounds sad. That
Hmm.
any other dude would have just dropped, and that would have been the end of the play.
Right, right. But it was just, because he was so freakishly strong in his legs that it
Yeah,
actually pulled it out. It wasn't a tackle; it was his leg muscles in
yeah,
pulling his hip out. That's what I'm trying to say.
makes sense. So what's cold blooded about it is that the Royals cut him. They didn't even mess with him at all that next year. They just cut him. And I don't know medically what people were saying. I'm sure it was a everyday update, but they cut him. And dealing with his hip, he missed all of 91 and 92. Now, if I'm not mistaken, ultimately he ended up with a new hip. At least part of his hip was
Hmm.
artificial. I don't know if it was the
Right.
ball or the socket or both. And he came back with a limp and played for the White Sox, as usually played DH. His outfield days were over. He played DH.
Right.
Played with the White Sox in 93. There's footage of him limping around. And in 93, he won the comeback player of the year, which is actually an astronomical achievement considering what he went through physically. And he played 93 for them and won that award, and they didn't renew his contract. So he went to Anaheim and played one more year in 94, and then he retired. So he didn't play anymore after that. But there is definitely footage of him limping around in the White Sox pinstripes. And by the way, back then he was back playing with Frank Thomas,
Oh
if I'm
yeah,
sure.
that's true. I didn't think about that. Which
So
yeah, Frank did play for Auburn. I looked that up earlier. So
okay, that's what I thought. They were, and I guess they overlapped at least a year there.
yeah, I think so. Maybe a year. I don't think
Okay,
they played, you know, long as teammates, but yeah,
okay.
they were both Auburn guys.
So all of that to say, and I didn't do a good job
Like cross
of
trainers
explaining
or
it, but
something.
all of that to
Yeah,
say, the guy was an absolute
yeah,
freak, and
yeah.
he had a major impact on pop culture as well. I put pop culture notes in here because that's part of what we do. Sports are part of pop culture. The Bo Knows Nike campaign was huge. I had some Nike. He what kind of shoes specifically was he selling for Nike? Do y'all remember? Yes, yes. Remember the commercials? It was him playing different sports, but not even playing. It was weird stuff
When,
like riding a
when,
bike.
Right.
yeah, I was gonna
And
say, what's the time frame
and I
on
think the
that?
commercials were in black and
Was
white.
that
It's like Bo knows cycling, Bo knows tennis, and
okay?
he's usually wearing his trainers,
Yeah.
doing all the stuff you don't associate him with.
I mean, he basically became a brand himself, and I don't remember anyone else doing that before him.
Yeah,
Other than a guy named Michael Jordan, they overlapped. I
Yeah.
mean, Jordan came into the
Okay.
NBA in '85, and he got
85. Yeah.
Nike. So he got Nike bumped up to the big leagues because Adidas and Converse were the big shoes. He
oh
bumped
yeah,
them up, and they dovetailed the Jordan phenomenon right in there
Okay.
with Bo.
Okay.
They were absolute contemporaries and built Nike into what Nike became because they had two different avenues to approach it from. You got the basketball, and then Bo almost covered everything else by being a two sport guy. So
Oh,
it was brilliant.
they were in commercials together, I think. Correct.
Yeah, they were in something else together too that I'm about to mention. So,
Okay.
well, I'll go ahead and mention that because the next one is really important to us. So, Bo was in it wasn't his, they didn't use their voices, but I do remember this. Bo and Michael Jordan and Wayne Gretzky played superhero athletes in a Saturday morning cartoon called Pro Stars. And it was Bo and Wayne and Michael Jordan running around the country being awesome for kids, basically teaching them how to play ball and being like superheroes. They didn't voice the characters, but they used their names. So Bo had his own Saturday morning cartoon. And then here's the big one. I'm winding down, I promise. Here's a big one. His nickname to some people, was Tecmo Bo.
Mm-hmm.
Tecmo Bo. By gamers. Gamers gave him that nickname because his skills as a running back in Tecmo Bowl, and we played Tecmo Bowl like they were never going to make video games ever again when we were
Right.
back then. The three of us plus a couple of other people together, and
Right.
if you called the wrong play and on defense and Bo got the ball, he was going to score because he was so
Right.
fast.
He was unstoppable. You always tried to get.
Yep.
You always tried to get the team Bo was on.
And what I remember was, I don't know what they called it, but his ability to shake tacklers off, like they just bounced off of him. You remember that? Like, and then he would
Mm-hmm.
outrun all of them. So I actually laughed about that out loud. Out of all the things I read about, other than him on purpose getting enough points to not have to run distance in the decathlon, was that he was called Tecmo Bo, because I knew y'all would like that.
That's a whole nother episode.
Yes. Hey, I remember playing people in Tecmo, and it's probably people on this call right now. And before the game would ever start, you would say, "Okay, nobody can pick the Raiders." You
Right.
remember? Or nobody,
I remember.
you would always, nobody can pick the Raiders. I'll play you San Francisco against Chicago, but nobody's getting the Raiders. That was like you couldn't have that edge. And so you'd have to agree before you ever started these grudge matches that who you cannot have, And so y'all know who I'm talking about. There's
I
somebody
know
we grew
exactly
up
who you're
with.
talking about. No,
And
exactly.
you'd have to say, all right, you're not getting Bo Jackson if we play. I'll play you San Fran versus, whoever.
The same one that I probably used a certain kicker to kick a 60-yard field goal and beat in a match one time
It's also the same
on
person that I
Tecmo.
watched. I watched you one night in a grudge match. One of y'all had San Francisco. I don't know who, but I saw you pick this guy's first 6 plays of the game. Exactly. You know how if you called a
Mm-hmm.
defense exactly right, it would shut them
Right.
down. You called this guy's first 3 and outs to start the game, and he was throwing stuff around the
Throwing
around the
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 controller. Yeah.
around the mobile home. We were in the mobile home, and he was throwing stuff around because he went 3 and out the first 2 times he got the ball. All right. So, by the way, that'll be a topic too. We're going to definitely talk
Sure.
about Gen X video game. All right. So let me finish up. Bo is not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He didn't have the numbers to back that up, although he was well on his way. And he's not in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. So if anything, splitting sports, I've heard many journalists say and write that if he'd played either sport for his whole career, he'd be in that Hall of Fame, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or had he played both of them longer, as he should
Longer.
have,
Yeah.
10 or 12 years, he'd be in one or the other, if not both. So,
I think both. Yeah.
but yeah. So, along with his 1985 Heisman, which back then was a very prestigious deal, it's not so much anymore. I will say this: he's in the Royals Baseball Hall of Fame, and I thought when I first heard that, so what? But they only have 30 players in their Hall of Fame,
Wow.
and so for a guy who was only there 5 seasons, that's a pretty phenomenal achievement, really, for to be one of 30. So, and he and George Brett were teammates, so he was on some. He played with some quality guys. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame as of 1996, which he should be, and he won the Heisman
Right.
Trophy in 1985. So here's the big one, though, that statistically makes him a unicorn. And this is absolutely all you need to know about why he's misnumbered on that list of greatest athletes. He is the only person who ever walked the planet Earth to play in the Major League Baseball All-Star Game and the Pro Bowl.
Wow.
There's nobody else that can say that. And so he's one of one. I don't think Dion ever played in the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, so that would, Dion has him on a couple of other things we'll talk about.
Yeah, he played in the World Series and an NFL game in the same day.
Yeah,
But
we're gonna talk Dion.
yeah.
But even with Dion's achievements, he never played in the All-Star and the Pro Bowl, and that makes Bo one of one, I think. I think that is astronomically impossible odds to do that for a human being, if you really think about it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my closing shot on Bo Jackson. When you think about how good do you have to be in high school to play college ball? Okay. How good do you have to be in college to play pro? Okay. How good do you have to be as a pro to be an all-star? Okay. Now, how good do you have to be in two sports to be in their all-star games? And the answer is, well, you have to be Bo Jackson good.
Right.
So I feel like I talk too much about stats, but the fact is, by reputation alone, anybody our age knows Bo Jackson, whether it's through Tecmo Bowl, baseball, football, or Nike ads or whatever. He's definitely a legend, and he's definitely in my opinion, way higher than the 72nd best athlete of the 20th century. He has to be in the top dozen, if not the top 10.
Yeah, that's what surprises me. He's not at least in the top 15. I can see some of the people that they have
Well,
ahead of him, sure, but just the fact that how hard it is to make it to the NFL, how hard it is to make it to the major leagues, and you're all-star in both, Pro Bowl all-star, and you're that far down the list. I don't get it.
it's funny you bring that up because I'm going to close. I'm going to close with this because I looked it up. The odds of a high school football player playing college ball are 7%. Okay.
Hmm.
The odds of a college football player playing pro football are 1.6%.
Hmm.
Okay. So I couldn't even find these numbers. I got my calculator out and it hurt my head. But so if you take every pro player and extrapolate out how many of those there's been that have played in the Pro Bowl, you've got a number, but then you have to go back and look at the high school kids and say how many of them ended up being a Pro Bowler. Okay, so that's a astronomical number in itself, but
Right.
that's just the NFL. So baseball, high school players have a 5.6% rate of playing college ball. That's any NCAA classification. 5.6. And your odds actually go up. If you're in college, your odds of getting drafted jump up to 10.5%. But the numbers shrink, but the opportunity grows basically.
Right.
And so from
Right.
college to being drafted, your chances go up to 10%. But because there's so many rounds in the draft, your odds of playing in the major leagues are only 5%. Okay.
Right. To
So
actually make it to the major leagues, you
so
get
a high
drafted, but
school
you don't
baseball
actually.
player. Correct. And so a high school baseball player has a 0.5% chance of ever being drafted and playing in the major leagues, basically. Now, so take that 0.5 and take that 1.6 of, or yeah, 1.6 of that other number, and that's just becoming a pro. Now, what are the odds that you would be an all-star in both of those sports? And it's incalculable. You couldn't come up with a number. I mean, yeah, statistically, you could say there's this many players over this many years, blah blah blah. But we're nowhere near 1% chance to do that. He is a rare, the unicorn for pro sports, in my opinion. Now, there are other guys that have played other two sports, obviously. Nobody ever played it at that, they don't really play it at that level. So we'll talk about Dion in the next one, and we'll talk about what he did that Bo didn't do. But even Dion didn't qualify as an all-star in both sports. So
No.
I think that makes Bo, between that and his pop culture influence and so forth, I think that makes that dude way higher than 72. I mean, he was,
Yeah.
for people our age, we knew how much of
This,
a bad human being he was.
yeah. This sums it up. I just went to the Kansas City Royals uh, Twitter page, X page, when he was inducted. And this is how they led into it. Dual sport icon, all-star game MVP, superhuman, living legend. The end.
Yeah. I think that's the best way to say it. Living legend. And you know what? I've never heard of Bo being involved in a scandal other than the one that was put on him by Tampa Bay Bucks. You've never heard about Bo
Right.
getting arrested and just to stand. Apparently, the thing I didn't mention is he's on a ton of boards, board of
Hmm.
directors for a ton of charities. He raises a bunch of money for kids and for various causes.
Right.
Just a stand-up guy, and even in retirement, you've never heard of him, getting in any trouble, and
Nope.
people love the guy. And I can't think of anybody on planet Earth that was ever that big and that strong and that fast. That's why I think he's one
Nope.
of the top 10 athletes that ever lived in any century, probably. So, and then he proved it. He's got the numbers to back it up, honestly. The only thing I'm sad about is that he didn't get to play like 10 full seasons in both sports. Even if he did them both, even if he played 100 baseball games and only 8 football games a year, it would have been crazy to see what he could have done in about 10 years doing that,
I,
instead
I
of just
think it would.
basically four or five.
The shape he was in, the natural shape he was in. Of course, he's famous for saying, "I never worked out. I don't. He just didn't work out. He was
Yeah,
naturally gifted and built that way. So, yeah, if he hadn't had that
right.
freak injury, how long would he have played, and what would he have done?
I don't
May
know
still
because
be playing.
even as a even as well, yeah. I mean, even at his age now, he's better than some of them. I can think of one
Hmm.
team that could use him desperately right now. Um,
I wonder if they held that against him on the ranking because he didn't play
it could
very
be.
long.
I
I,
didn't
I
look
think you're
into
right,
it.
Casey.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about, but that very likely could be. Yeah. I mean, I just know that when I was little and really getting into football, when it came to college ball, Herschel Walker was the guy. I knew he was the guy. He was in sports. But then Bo came along, and I'm not saying there's probably people that think Herschel was better, but man, it's like Herschel took it to a 10, but then Bo had 11 and 12 also.
Hmm.
As far as faster, stronger, more power, he just had a couple of more notches that nobody had ever really seen, and so just an absolute freak. And I'm telling you, since I played high school baseball, I've always been fascinated with the arms from these shortstops and outfielders and so forth. And dude, you can go look at the highlights. He had as good of an arm from the outfield as you'll ever see ever in the game of baseball. It's just phenomenal how well he threw runners out. I mean, I don't know if
Hmm.
he was accurate, but he had the power to do it for sure. So some of the prettiest plays you've ever seen were him throwing people out at home or whatever. So,
Yeah, from
all right,
warning
guys, I'm going
track
to end the
in right
recording.
field.
Absolutely. I'm going to end the recording right here, but hang on for just a second. All right. So anyway, that's going to be 2 episodes on Bo, guys. And I really appreciate y'all's time. And I'm going to stop the recording right here.
Thank you for joining us on Gen X Classic Sports, where nostalgia meets the thrill of the game. Tune in next time for more insightful discussions and memorable moments, brought to you by Pine Street Productions. Until then, stay passionate about sports and keep the memories alive.